You're listening to the One Take Wonder podcast with the Hot Weird Girl, and I'm the Hot Weird Girl in question, Alexia. I'm so glad that you're here. New episodes come out every Monday, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. One thing that really helps this podcast is leaving your honest feedback, whether that's 5 stars on Apple Music, Spotify, or whatever platform you tune into, leaving a written review if possible, but most importantly, reaching out to me directly at Hot Weird Girl, that's girl with the 0 instead of an I, and letting me know what new ideas you have for the podcast, something you'd like to expand on more, or even just a funny, silly thing that you'd like me to address. Let's get into the episode, but not without me saying thank you so much for tuning in. Here we go. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I took a sick day yesterday, kind of deflecting from my normal upload schedule. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, first of all, what are you doing? You should follow me. But also, it's just a cool way to get updates. I have a bitch of an upper respiratory infection. Yeah, last week, and honestly, probably the week before that, when I was talking about I'm losing my voice and I'm not really sure why. That was just the beginnings of an infection that honestly, last Monday is when I really started to feel like shit. And it got worse throughout the week. Also, I handle being sick like a man, which is so unfortunate because I'm someone who gets sick so easily. I have a terrible, weak little immune system, and I would love to believe that it's in my head and I'm gaslighting myself. Like when I was in Peru, I started experiencing digestive issues, like my stomach just hurt, food wasn't sitting well with me, which honestly happens when you go to another country. Like you're just not used to their germs, you're not used to their water. It can be a lot. I think especially if, you're like me and you seem to have the immune system of a Victorian child. But then I got back and I wasn't getting better and I was like, maybe I'm being dramatic, but this is what health insurance is for. I should go to my doctor. Fucking E. coli. So, the good news is that I have been placed on antibiotics and maybe it's a placebo, but it's helping. I mean, I don't sound as bad as I did the past couple days because it was unrecordable. Like the last 2 weeks in terms of how I sounded and how disrespectful I think it is to come on a mic when you're sick and just sort of put your congested, snotty, filmy little voice on the mic. Unacceptable. So I'm sorry for the delay in what is a very hotly anticipated topic, more than what I had planned originally to talk about this week or to delve into. Everyone wants me to talk about the Sabrina Carpenter of it all. And I think social media, or perhaps it's just my algorithm, has been on freaking fire with her latest album announcement and album cover. So for those of you who are out of the loop, perhaps not as chronically online, don't pay attention to celebrities the way I do. Last week, Sabrina Carpenter announced that she had a new album coming out. This coincided with her interview in Rolling Stone, where she talks about she didn't originally anticipate releasing a new album after her last one, which honestly don't even know the name of because I'm not a huge Sabrina Carpenter fan. And I don't mean that in a way where I don't like her. I like the Me Espresso song. I like Bedcam. I like Please, Please, Please. I probably would like more of her music if I listened to it. But she did a Rolling Stone interview where she talks about, she just had some music and she wanted to release it and she didn't anticipate it. And then her Instagram stories, when that Rolling Stone article came out, maybe a few days after, she releases the album cover for her new album titled Man's Best Friend. And people are perceiving it to be salacious. So the photograph, you should pull it up to look at this, but I'll try best to describe. It's Sabrina on her knees. Her one hand is raised, reaching towards a man knee because there's a man in front of her, sort of mildly grabbing a fistful of her hair. She's looking at the camera suggestively. She's wearing heels. She's wearing a little black dress. A bow drapes in the front. She's on, a beige carpet. There's a white curtain background. It very much has the feel and the graininess of an 80s photograph. We see her well-manicured hand, again, on the man's knee. And this has sent people into a frenzy, right? I do think this is a good example of social media just overreacting to things. So I kind of want to take the hullabaloo and the conspiracy out of it. First, first I want to give the caveat that she hasn't released the track list for the album, and also the album doesn't come out until August. So analyzing this as like a body of work, whether this is like good art, I won't make that determination until I actually listen to the album. And I do promise you guys that although Sabrina Carpenter is not in my usual repertoire, I will listen to the entire album. I will check out the set list and come back months later and see if my opinion still stands. Although, tucking my hair behind the ear. Oh, and that's the other thing that I meant to say at the beginning of the episode. There are no visuals. I couldn't do it. I feel like fucking shit, guys. And the thought of like setting a camera up and filming, like I look like SpongeBob when he had the suds. Makeup is not fixing that. And frankly, I don't want documented evidence of that on the internet, okay? And I'm a confident person. Many of my TikTok videos, I'm not wearing makeup. My hair is not particularly done or what other people would consider it to be done. And I'm fine with that. But I draw the line at looking pale because where I am right now, I look like 4 shades lighter, which is terrifying, and sickly. And like I said, blush isn't fixing that. So I apologize for those of you who are on YouTube right now, perhaps a bit bamboozled that I didn't address this from the outset. But yeah, there is no corresponding behind the scenes YouTube video. That is my cat trying to get into a bag in the background because, well, this podcast be without Matthew trying to announce himself somehow. But to get into, again, the Sabrina Carpenter of it all, it has caused just a huge hubbub and a lot of conspiracies, and I kind of want to go through them one by one. So the first thing is that she released this for PR. Sabrina Carpenter is a singer, actress, entertainer. As much as she is a person, she's also a brand. So yes, you should assume that everything she does in the public eye has a public relations spin. Sometimes I think people talk about PR like it's a dirty word or like it's a secret trick. And I mean, when you're in entertainment, when your bread and butter comes from getting the public to pay attention to you, like, of course you would do a publicity grab. And this was certainly a publicity grab, right? She knew that this photo would be controversial. I don't know if she could have predicted this type of backlash, and we'll get into my, thoughts and opinions on it. But she knew there would be some sort of intrigue, some sort of interest. It sparks excitement and also like public attention towards her album rollout, and that's just part of the job. To me, if you want to talk about celebrity culture and you want to be taken seriously as like a cultural critic, you can't go around being like, oh, well, she did it for attention. Everything celebrities do is for attention. That is their job. If it truly bothers you, don't pay attention to it. Why this bothers people, I think, is a really good distinction between people not being able to decide whether this is good art, which for me, I'll say perhaps too early to call it, although I'm not impressed by like the visual aspects. Like, I just don't think it's a good shot. Maybe there's something like, okay, man's best friend, you're a bitch, we get it. Or is this like valid art? And I have seen sort of the overwhelming opinion online, or at least where I'm looking like on celebrity pop culture, Reddit, and TikTok, as like, this is terrible, wicked art that's setting women back. That is fucking preposterous. First, just to speak to the sexuality of the image, and God, this is probably a week where the visual component really would have helped to like keep this image up by my head. If this is the most scandalous thing that you've ever seen, I genuinely don't understand what type of media you consume, because this has the same level of sexiness as like a raunchy European perfume commercial. From the way that people describe this, like I saw one girl on TikTok say like, I can't even put the image behind me or I'll get banned. It is the merest suggestion of a blowjob and the mildest engagement with kink because he's pulling her hair, and honestly, not that hard. it's not even a lot of hair to be pulled. Like, she's on her knees. They are nude in perfume commercials, right? Like, they're very sensual. There's breasts. There's like breathy moans. There's like air de perfume. And then like other male moaning noises. I think I've seen Michael Jackson music videos with the same level of sensuality. For people freaking out and saying like this is overtly sexual, I don't even think that this is an image that would garner the mature rating on HBO. Like, people, when I say I'm confused about the type of media that you're consuming, they show straight up fucking on most HBO shows, right? Most serious types of television always have somewhat gratuitous like sex scenes. Again, perfume commercials. The lyrics of any song from any decade are outlandish. People like to pretend that WAP is the craziest thing they heard. There are songs from the 30s, and maybe I'll put that in the recommended reading, where this girl is talking just straight up like, pop my jimmies off. Like, if you are not familiar with the slang from like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and that's why it's not impressing upon you that like they were talking about sex and the messiness of it. Like, Elvis, that little, you may have learned as a kid, if you've never seen his performances, that he was like up there dancing. He was thrusting at everyone, popping his dick at everyone. So for Sabrina Carpenter to be on her hands and knees, she doesn't even have messed up, like, it's not like her eyeliner's running, right? Like, that would be a more intense suggestion of a beach. Her lipstick's not smudged, like her makeup looks perfect. It's not even vaguely pornographic, other than a man is pulling her by her hair. She's in front of a man on his hands and knees, and you can't even see like the fly of his zipper. It's covered up. The man is in, some sort of suit with like formal dress shoes on. So it almost feels very like, is this your first time in society? And if this is what's shocking to you, like, you would probably have a hard time watching a beer commercial. Oh my God. Like, do you remember GoDaddy for like the past, I don't know if they still, I don't watch sports like that anymore. I should probably text my boyfriend because he does. But for a long time, like GoDaddy, the advertisement, like web hosting platform, would use their title GoDaddy, which daddy obviously being used in a sexual way, and it just had like girls jumping up and down and like their tits flying and being like, "Go daddy, go," and it was like sex jokes to promote a website advertising thing. Like, sex sells. So just to get that out of the way, if this was truly supposed to be a shocking piece of sexual imagery, like, who does this shock? But then sometimes I think about the fact that what is mundane to me, I guess, is shocking about other people. Like, just to go on a completely separate tangent, but I promise you it relates. To me, it's the same outrage about Lily Tino. If you don't know who this is, Lily Tino is a trans woman who's infamous on the internet for rage baiting under the guise of bringing awareness to trans issues. It is very clear that her platform has never been a good faith like documentation of her experience as a trans woman and how she navigates life, and more so that she clearly gets off on the attention of engaging like transphobes, homophobes, people who just don't like to see a trans woman in public. And she puts herself in situations where everyone is the antagonist. And rather than focusing on the actual antagonistic experiences that trans women go through on the day-to-day, and I don't want to downplay or like try to minimize, I think how hard of a life experience that is, particularly if you're not a trans woman who's passing as cis, and so you're clockable, that puts your life in danger, and it also just makes your material reality harder. But all of her content is adversarial. Like, she goes, without seeing her videos, it sounds terrible to say like she goes out of her way to be misgendered, but she places herself in situations where she forces like wait staff or cashiers who are already like not really paying super attention to her job because she's not doing this in like fine dining restaurant. She's doing this in like a Denny's, forcing them to gender her. They don't always get it right. And then sort of creating like a huge hullabaloo about that, filming her reactions to get free comped meals. And throughout her tenure on TikTok, because she's been doing this for like 4 or 5 years, she continues to up the ante and escalate her antics. And one of the ways that she's now escalated is by targeting Disney, in the sense that she makes it a big deal at a time when the nation is embroiled about trans bathroom debates and the disgusting perversion that I think you really have to be consumed by to care about someone's genitals and truly whether or not what bathroom they're in or whether or not someone's like passing or woman enough. And it almost feels like I don't want to demean your intelligence to your audience by repeating it, but I still can't believe there are people out there who think that like if men wanted to rape women, they'd go through the time and effort of like dressing up as a woman to get into bathrooms, when if a man wanted to rape a woman in a bathroom, he would just go into a bathroom and do it anyway, because men already do that now. Like there's no need to go through a rigmarole when you can just do it now and probably get away with it, or at least not be severely punished on it. That is a completely separate topic. But Lily Tino focuses on bathrooms because Disney is like a big deal to simple people. Sorry, maybe that wasn't the nicest way to phrase that. It is though. It's like a few weeks ago when I was talking about the Disney remakes and like why it was such a big deal that like Disney was remaking their favorite movies, and like the mouse is not coming to your house with a gun and putting it to your head and like forcing you to watch his latest attempt to retain copyright over a piece of like media. But then I realized that like some people feel like because this company made my favorite movies, like I have this unyielding loyalty to this brand. And so Lily Sisto? What is her last name? It doesn't matter. This girl's life goal is to basically go around and rankle as many people as possible in a way that like minimizes and makes a mockery of trans issues. And because people do not want to see trans people as human beings, they'll allow the bad faith actions of Lily to represent the normal everyday intentions of other trans people. It's like once in a blue moon, like a Black person will get famous on the internet for doing things like running around with buckets of fried chicken or like shoving watermelons in their mouth at the same time and like shucking and jiving in front of a random cafeteria. And then they're kind of like using the rage bait, but also like they're like courting the racist for engagement, and then also using like the genuine disgust for members of their own community to fulfill their own ends of getting their 15 minutes of fame and getting the attention, because there's no way that Lily is making money from this. She's making money through the creator fund, but she's not getting like brand deals or anything, right? Anyway, I say this as part of a Lily uses Disney to sort of like, because it's a great way to get simple people to pay attention to her content. And they're also the type of people that would be enraged by this and want to see trans people as a monolith of bad faith actors. Back to the Sabrina Carpenter of it all, because I told you I was going to pull it all around. To me, the outrage of sexuality, or like her expressed sexuality, very much feels like that, where it's not... It's like maybe this is mundane to me because I just don't think like that. And like for me to be shocked by something sexually explicit in the public eye, it would have to be crazy. It would have to be crazier than something that I could see on, like it would have to be something that you would have to go to a specific subreddit for a niche for, that I would have to be like, oh, that's weird. Right? And so it feels like bait for simple people, which is weird because at the same time, there's that Love Island clip, which I don't watch Love Island, but I'm trying to get into it now if I don't fall asleep after recording this episode, because everyone's talking about it and I hate feeling left out. And also like 5 of my friends have texted me and I finally got a Peacock password because honestly, I wasn't going to pay for that. And I will not watch Peacock with ads. That is a very big thing with me. I do not like ads in my house. It's why I pay for YouTube Premium. It's why I pay. Anytime there is an option to just pay to not have ads on something, I pay for it. I understand that it bothers other people less. You don't want to listen to my podcast with ads, you are free to subscribe. Shameless plug. But you don't have to, because there will always be free content. Going back to the Love Island thing, there was literally a challenge where they're tied up by their hands and feet in an X, in skimpy, like the boys are shirtless and the girls are wearing lingerie, and then other girls go around and like they do a makeout challenge. First of all, that's incredibly kinky. The being tied up of it all, the specific like bondage wear that they were using, like the leather and the specific types of lingerie. And like, how is that less offensive to your sensibilities than the Sabrina Carpenter of it all? And people just want to use feminism to justify why they don't like the Sabrina Carpenter of it. And they're also bastardizing like what feminism in itself is. I wish that a women's studies 101 course was a mandatory class in high school, or that people would go out and try to educate themselves on like what you would learn in a feminism 101, or like a women's studies, a gender studies, whatever program at your local liberal arts institution is calling it, like for you to learn about the history of gender equality and the feminist movements. Because a lot of these debates that I see hashed out online are clearly coming from people who haven't done the reading, haven't done the work. And so they're approaching these topics as if, one, they're the first person to ever speak on it. And two, with like a very limited, like it's very shallow. There's not a lot of complexity. There's not a lot of nuance. People are bastardizing like actual academic terms to prove their point that like, I don't like when a woman acts sexy like this for a man. This podcast in and of itself is not going to be the history of feminism, but you should know about the existence of the different waves of feminism that are going to sort of falling out of use depending on which scholars you pay attention to. But there is an idea that there have been different iterations in Western feminism. And right now I'm just concentrating, my feminist studies to the West, because when you look at like the global South, Latin America, Asia, waves of feminism have been different there. And there's also, some scholars who argue that certain movements have been happening concurrently. But the different waves, it's theorized that we're perhaps in the fourth wave right now. What ultimately broke up the second wave of feminism into the third wave of feminism, what's referred to as the feminist sex wars, the feminist porn wars. Some people call it the lesbian sex wars. And it essentially was the conversation that people are attempting to have now with Sabrina Carpenter. And you should know, before I get into all of this, that it wasn't ever really resolved, that there are people who do the work and the diligence and scholars who come to completely different conclusions. You can probably guess where I lie, and I'm happy to explain that to you because we haven't even scratched, this is going to be a long episode. I haven't even scratched the surface of it, but second wave feminist essentially felt like, and I'll put this in the required reading, felt like because women were sexualized under patriarchy, that there was a duty to defy that. They had anti-pornographic views. There was a lot of discourse, particularly about kink, that there was no way to engage in like kink or BDSM where you are being submissive or subservient to a man, or where a man is enacting consensual physical violence on you for sexual pleasure, that you can truly consent to, because in this system of patriarchy where you have been told that you are, only a sexual object who must accept sexual degradation, which is a big part of patriarchy that I don't think I typically speak on the podcast, although I certainly could go there. So for you to be participating in it, you're not making like a conscious choice. And third wave feminists sort of broke away with that, again, going in different areas, but more so under the belief that like, I don't want to say you can make the choice, because choice feminism is not really what I'm talking about, but that you can, that those ideas about sexuality ultimately take away a woman's autonomy. And that's what I believe. Ultimately, I don't think that I'm going to get out of the patriarchy in my lifetime. And I don't think that there's a reasonable way to opt out of it. Like, unless I lived on a society alone with no others, I think it would be impossible for me to escape the daily reality of being under the patriarchy. I hope that for my great-granddaughters, or perhaps even my granddaughters, that is not a reality. And I can say certainly that like the effects of gender inequality have lessened in my lifetime. I think about what was taught to me and like what was normal and acceptable when I was a kid. And in my 28 short years of life, I have seen, society is more progressive, especially when I think about like weight and body image and just the way that we talk about like women and intelligence. Like I look back on the media from when I was a kid, or like the things I was reading as a kid, and I'm like, wow, I genuinely think it's better for my younger sisters now. So it's not to say that we're not making progress, we're not going in a helpful direction, but I think there is this misguided belief, again, from people who have not done the work or reading, that patriarchy is something that you can opt out of. You can completely be aware of patriarchy. You can be aware of how it affects you. You can try to deconstruct as much as you can the effects of growing up in this society, and you can try to raise your children to the best of your ability in a way where both genders, not both, all genders are equal, where people are not better or worse based on their gender, like assigned at birth, where gender is a construct. And still, you will live in a patriarchal society because you are not, you think you just fell out of a coconut tree. You are burdened by all that came before you. Love you, big sister general. And so when I say that, because when I talk about sexualization, yes, patriarchy robs, like automatically assigns women as like sexual beings who are only good for sex or motherhood, the Madonna whore complex where you can never truly win. And even in satisfying these roles to the best of your ability, you're still subhuman, particularly so if you choose to opt into your sexuality. And yet saying that performing sexuality in a way that's historically been, appreciated by men or glorified by men or like encouraged by the patriarchy takes away women's autonomy. And I don't necessarily believe that the way you express your sexuality has to be political. I think it can be, but I think it puts too high. Again, I think that it takes away autonomy, that like to teach girls that, I don't know, I'll start with a story from my childhood, and that's, I remember when I was a kid, the big thing was smart girls didn't like pink. Girls have, pink has always been forced on girls, pink being associated with like hyper femininity and this very specific version of femininity that patriarchal conditioning and society taught us was not smart. And so in an effort to get out of that, I remember at like my hippy dippy private school that I went in through K through 8, where everyone was like the child of a professor, and where we talked about things like gender studies in middle school. And, we were encouraged to, like, I remember going to an Iraq protest with my an Iraq war protest with my 4th grade teacher, and we were all encouraged to be smart. We were all told that we were like smart and gifted and, different types of kids and brilliant little kids. For the girls, it was really shameful. And it was almost considered like a failure to be very hyper feminine, because instead of questioning the larger social like ideals that associated hyper femininity, or just this version of like girly girlhood with stupidity, and saying like, actually, like your aesthetic is not indicative of your intelligence, right? Like you can love pink, and you can recognize that there are problems with Barbie and still like Barbie, and you can still like to wear dresses. And instead, it encouraged this adherence to the masculine to be taken seriously. And that's very much a product of his time. Like these were, again, I brought up our parents to say that these were coming from people, women specifically, who had gone into their like white collar professions with the idea that in order to be taken seriously, they had to emulate men. This was very much a thing in law too, where it wasn't until very recently in law where women allowed to express femininity. It was very much for the few women that were like really breaking glass ceilings. For me and other women in the profession, to be taken seriously, you had to be very masculine, which was also this paradox because a lot of courtrooms, depending on where you practice, and I still know some courtrooms today where they can't legally, like they can't say you have to wear a skirt, but like it's very much understood that if you're going to appear in front of Judge so-and-so, like you need to be wearing a skirt and pantyhose, because he's not going to take, and yes, it's always a he's not going to take well to pants, where you're expected to like, yes, you wear the professional business suit, but you don't wear pink, you don't put an obvious showing of makeup. There is, using the word paradox again, this paradox that women are trapped in where you have to wear enough makeup to be, presentable, because God forbid somebody sees a woman's bare face or the bags under her eyes. But to put an obvious show of makeup that it looks like, okay, I woke up in the morning, I beat my face, I did an intricate eyeshadow look, I, really took my time with my blush, I plucked my brows. That was unacceptable. That was seen as too much. And so I think the people, my like early education teachers and, the parents and my Girl Scout leaders, when they were teaching us this, they were very much coming from this world where, like, in order to be taken seriously as like glass ceiling breakers in their field, they had to be very masculine. And I know they did it from like a place of goodwill, but still the more obvious conclusion is to be like, you can be very girly and still be very fucking badass. And that's why I loved Totally Spies so much when I was a kid, because I think I'm a very girly person. I'm currently staring at my ceiling, which is still covered in hot pink streamers from my party where I wore a giant pink princess hat in all pink. Should probably upload the pictures to Instagram. But very much this like smart girls don't do pink. And that was not encouraged of us as kids. It wasn't encouraged to like, oh my God, sorry, it was sick noise, to wear skirts. And so we ended up buying into the myth that like you could be more respectable as a girl by going for more masculine pursuits. And that there was legitimacy in demonizing that particular construction of like what being a little girl is, even though again, that rhetoric should have been changed to like your aesthetic, your interests, your hobbies, your love of a color does not make you stupid. And it is wrong to assume and teach those things. And by reinforcing that those things are bad and that they do make you stupid, it just teaches internalized misogyny. And I bring that up to say that that's what I feel about the whole like, well, she's setting women back with this sexual image. I think it's well intentioned, but it's coming from a place where like you're not doing the reading. You don't have a cursory understanding. And I'm sorry that I didn't explain the waves of feminism better. I will put it in the recommended reading, which let me know if you guys actually read that. Because it's something you should understand for yourself, but it's very much coming from girls who are like, well, true feminists don't do things that looks like it plays into the patriarchy. And while I can understand and respect the second wave feminists who did so much for me in my life, this is the other thing is when you study this, you also realize how necessary it was for them to combat that. Like we're talking about a movie or a movement from the 70s and 80s and just the way that women were depicted before then and the way that women depicted after, like they made so much ground and so much headway. And so it almost makes sense for the time why they had to adopt that very like hardline stance. Things have gotten a little bit more better now. And I think we have more freedom now to sort of ask those questions that come when maybe your most, I don't want to say basic needs are met, but when you have a bit more of your freedoms sorted out and fought for, that like, I don't want to take away the autonomy of women by saying that every sexual act or your expression of sexuality must be within these strict confines that are defined by what is good feminism and what is bad feminism. And to be clear, I do think choice feminism is a problem. And that is a term that refers to like, to put it simply, this idea that like every choice you make as a woman is a feminist choice because you are a woman making it. That's not true. Right? We very much have to examine the systems by which people make their choices. And again, this is the debate. Because I have friends who took the same classes with me in college and wrote the same papers that I did who have disagreed with me this week. And they're like, well, you have to examine the lens from where, or you have to like examine the macro and where we come from and understand that like, she's not making these choices in a vacuum. And what does it say about our broader culture? To me, the image is not salacious enough that I think she's playing into anything. She's just expressing her sexuality in a very like, again, sensual perfume ad wouldn't bat an eye on HBO sort of way, right? Like, it's not even like she's in lingerie. She's in a full fucking dress and heels. Her panties aren't even out. Like, her hair's not even that messed up apart from the side that's being pulled. And then I saw it and it's like, well, the pulling of the hair, like, that's degrading it. And again, it goes back to these like feminist sex wars of like, can you engage in kink without being, or BDSM without playing into the patriarchy? I think that one's a little bit more settled, that like what you do again with your personal autonomous sex life, you can make it political and you cannot be. But as well-intentioned as I think it is, it doesn't like hold weight or sway me, because had you been able to like cite the text, or at least have an idea of what like different feminist scholars had to say on the issue, you wouldn't be asserting yourself as some sort of like profound expert. And then I also think it's the confusion, like a lot of feminism's message has been lost online by like muddy definitions and this anti-intellectualism. Like, anti-intellectualism, as I've talked about so many times, devalues expertise, devalues like actual learning and research. And quiet as it's kept, TikTok's ever-shifting definition and like complete augmentation of well-established academic terms is anti-intellectualism. It is anti-intellectualism to take terms like white passing, for example. When people online were discussing Sinners, there became a debate over what is white passing. There is no debate on what is white passing. That has been settled since the fucking antebellum days, right? It's not even an academic term. Like, very much white passing was used to refer to Black people who, by all intents and purposes, phenotypically looked white, which often happened on plantations due to the brutal nature of sexual violence against enslaved women. Generations of sexual violence obviously produces people who are lighter skinned, and white passing is not light skinnedness. It is truly like, I think about my grandpa in his younger days did not choose to pass for white and has always lived his life as a Black man, but some of his cousins did leave New Orleans, go to California, and pass as white successfully. Again, like we talked about in the Sinners episode, how you had to leave your domain. And so many people wanted to insist online during Sinners discourse that white passing meant something about augmenting your looks. I'm going to be real with you. For you to successfully pass for white in the antebellum days, or in the era of the Jim Crow South, or I guess as I should say, during the era of Jim Crow, you didn't need to put on a relaxer. Like, your hair was already at most wavy, right? They were talking about white passing like girls were putting on lighter shade makeup every day and doing things to their hair. And yes, of course, like I talked about in the Sinners episode, white passing women were concerned about perhaps going in the sun, getting too dark, or what their children would look like, but they didn't have to physically do anything to their opinions. That is a form of anti-intellectualism, to disregard a century's worth of definitions and lived experiences and an accepted term in favor of you not being able to articulate what you actually want to say. And because people online like to feign legitimacy by bringing in words and concepts that they don't understand, because they have no respect for intellectualisms, for academic institutions, for historical record, for any sort of research, they don't see it as a problem to go in and completely change the tune or definition of like what these things fucking mean. And so when I say that feminism's messaging has been bastardized in some senses by people who are good intentioned, but so poor, but like, your intentions don't matter at a point when you're doing something that's in such bad faith, to change the definitions of what things mean, right? And I think about the term male-centered and the way it's used as a pejorative when I think about Sabrina Carpenter. A lot of people in their criticisms of Sabrina Carpenter's album cover have asserted that she is male-centered in her music, And the imagery is male-centered because she's kneeling in front of a man. Again, there's the suggestion of, a blowjob. There's the kink where she's submissive. And they're like, that is male-centered. And it feels like people have lost sight of the fact that if you are a woman who is sexually, romantically involved with men, they are in some way at least a factor in your expression of sexuality, because that's, if not the population you're trying to court. If you're straight, like part of the population you're trying to court. If you are, bisexual or pan or fluid. So like, duh. Right? Like, seeing people talk about like, why would she care what men thinks? I mean, to a certain level, again, and this episode is cool because I feel like we're pulling back on so many other previous like episodes and conversations that I've had on here. You cannot intellectualize yourself out of the human desire for romantic companionship. I've said that a couple times on here, but just to repeat it again, a lot of these like quote unquote, faux feminists online seem to believe that like, there is work that you can do not to deconstruct the patriarchy internally, but to deconstruct your absolute participation in it. And like I said earlier, that is fucking impossible. You would have to live alone. You would have to limit your human interaction to basically zilch, because I promise you, you cannot truly people spend a lifetime trying to articulate what a mindfuck it is to be socialized and to have constant social reinforcement of patriarchal values on your mind. Even if you had a group of women living on an island alone, like the odds that you will in some way have escaped like patriarchal conditioning or ideas about how women should behave, not likely. You would have to go to some planet where they didn't have the same gender hierarchy. Even in like matriarchal societies on this planet where their version of gender norms are different, like those same societies still have conceptions and notions of gender that on the surface may seem foreign to you, but they are still affected by like specific ways of thinking about gender. Like, for you to escape that completely, you would have to be by yourself. You are not deconstructing your participation in the patriarchy. And people's inability to grasp that is more about like their personal feelings and their refusal to go over what people have already I'm doing this work. I'm trying to, I don't want to be sanctimonious and say work, but like I'm making this podcast on the hope that like I can see what I want reflected in the world so that it is a better place for myself and my sisters, and that my daughters will not know certain challenges that I've faced, and that her daughters will not know certain challenges that I faced, and that it gets a little better for every generation. But like in my lifetime, in the 100 years that I probably get to have on this earth, God willing, like no. Right. So one, there's that thing. But then two, there's this aura that like your participation in the patriarchy in any way is as bad as patriarchal oppression itself. And that's like a very nuanced statement, because there is a big difference between a woman who sets up other women for sexual violence or sexual gratification, like, non-consensual sexual gratification, makes other women's victims, subjugates other women, versus women who participate in patriarchy in other ways, like wearing makeup. This is, again, the big debate that comes up whenever people talk about like sex work, which is, again, another kind of unresolved conflict in feminism, because some people feel that your participation as a sex worker, like you cannot be a feminist and be involved in sex work, because it is a patriarchal value to make you a sexual object and to reduce your value to like the commodification of your sexual abilities, right? I and many other feminists believe that that's ridiculous. One, I think it's just kind of whorephobia. It's a very intellectual way of saying that you don't like sluts. Second, I also think I don't think people's work has to be empowering. I don't think it has to be dignified. And I think there are very real protection issues for women in those professions. Would that profession exist without male perversion and male clientele? No. But it does. Women are going to continue to pursue it by and large because of, economic disadvantage, because we don't have societies that take care of our most marginalized because of their gender, because of their income level, because of their disability status, all things that heavily, if you find yourself trans or disabled or low income, that heavily pushes you into sex work compared to your peers who are born high income, non-disabled, cisgender. But at the same time, people might still participate in it, even if they have none of those, I guess, impediments or barriers, because that is their choice, right? Wanting protections for sex workers, or just saying, I don't really care if it's feminist or not, like, I still want them to be treated well, and it's a valid work profession, is again one of those unresolved debates. I keep saying unresolved debates, and I know I haven't given you guys like a satisfactory conclusion, but walk with me here, right? So it's coming from these girls who are really obsessed with the idea that if you don't latch on to what type of faux feminist vision they're peddling online, then you are the enemy, and that you are also condemned. I have said this before in previous episodes, but I'm not a big fan of the whole mean girl thing, but I truly think that a lot of these girls are just mean and taking out their contempt for women, like genuine contempt for women, by using these platforms to be like faux intellectual. Apparently I love that word today, faux. Should I get pho? Feng shui? For la Christmas. Focus. The like it's this contradictory thing where you are meant to quote unquote decenter men from your life, which what that actually means, as Bell Hooks wrote about it, for example, and what people on TikTok thinks it means, again, that anti-intellectualism of thinking that you get to bastardize an already well-established term, and that you're not. And that's not to say that in academia, like, terms can't change, popular definitions of terms can't change, but it's not coming from people who, like, respect these institutions or the intellectual, like, effort itself. It's just, again, coming from people who want the weight of the word to back up what they're saying, and so they're willing to use that word disingenuously, right? If they even understand that it's disingenuous, because a lot of these people are just straight up ignorant, stupid. But it's this thing where you're meant to, like, decenter the value of men, but also you get to laugh at women who have not been picked by men a certain way. Like, it has never made sense to me that there are this entire ideology online and these creators who, like, proliferate this ideology where on one hand they talk about decenter men, you shouldn't be thinking about men or dating, and then they constantly run their mouths about women in their dating horror stories. Like, they particularly pick on, like, baby mamas or girls who have had bad experiences with men, like girls who didn't learn the rules or get it as fast as they did, which I explained in previous episodes, but it is a privilege. Maybe not to the extent that, like, racial privilege or economic privilege, but it is a privilege to be able to, like, at an early age, easily break out of conditioning. And you also have to be primed for certain circumstances. Like I said, being raised in the environments that I was with, like, the parents that I have, and reading so much as a kid, and really being raised in, like, an open and intellectually curious and, like, an environment where if I didn't understand something, my mom was always like, well, let's go to the library and get you some books, and, you can research and learn why this is the way it is, was a big part in why at a young age I was even able to articulate things like, I'm a feminist, and these are my interests in it, right? Or, like, my interest in the movement. Versus someone who, if they had come from, like, a very religious environment where feminist was never even uttered, where, like, equality for the genders was, like, they're on a different path than me. And instead of recognizing that and wanting to, like, use grace and compassion to welcome more women into honestly a life and an ideology that is easier for them and better for them, they like laugh at women for not making the right choices, right? Like, how have you decentered men, but also you allow a man's determination of a woman's value to influence how you see her, right? Like, for some of these women, the worst thing that you can do is be treated poorly by a man, because then it reflects on you. That's just straight up old fashioned misogyny. That's still, in some sort of roundabout, convoluted way, no matter how you want to, whatever big words you want to use to describe it, continuously blames women for like the bad actions of men, right? Like, it is the worst thing to them that you could end up a baby mama because you didn't. And they'll claim it's about like, oh, because you thought that you were going to be different, you thought you didn't have to follow the rules, blah blah blah. But really it's about like, they never run their mouths about happily married women who did it right. Does that make sense? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Like, I do not think that you have truly decentered men because, and I know I've said this in previous episodes, but just to release it again, like, one of the powers that men are granted under patriarchy is that their opinion can be the end all be all for a woman's worth, right? Like, having experienced this myself, having seen it in real life, a man could say that he could say that he had sexual contact with you, and that will be more believable in society than the actual fact that like he's never seen you with a jacket off, let alone your top off, let alone nude. But because a man's opinion holds so much weight, and because women are always starting from like, 10 miles behind the finish line to prove themselves as even like an equal or worthy contender with men for everything, but especially when it comes to like social valuation and opinions, that just doesn't matter, right? Like, if why Sierra and her relationship with Russell Wilson makes men so angry is because Future clearly communicated to the world in the way that he treated her that like he was going to relegate her to the status of baby mama. And Future absolutely understands what he's doing, right? When he continues to create these broken homes with women. And we've talked about like in the Groomed for Abuse episode and reproductive abuse and coercion. And even if it wasn't abusive, just this idea that like you can lay claim to a woman by using her womb, not have anything to do, like you got her pregnant just so that people would know that you fucked her once, right? And that all of the judgment and the shame from the broken home doesn't come from the actor who created the broken home. It goes on to the woman, because again, women are responsible for the bad actions of men. And people are very angry that like Future communicated to the world that Sierra wasn't a woman to be cherished because he cheated on her a bunch, which, again, because women are to blame for the bad actions of men, communicated that there was something wrong with Sierra and not with Future for being a habitual cheater. And then he communicated that she wasn't even worth marrying because he wouldn't go through with the engagement and he just left her baby mama. And so for that communicated that like she always should have been lower status, right? It wasn't just a signal to other men, it was for women, like treat her accordingly as well. And it makes people incredibly angry to see a man of like high status and high worth, Russell Wilson, corny and as cheesy as he is, he's an incredibly high earning man. He's a man of faith. He seems to talk the talk and walk the walk. And he's, a good person who is unfalteringly, unwaveringly obsessed with Sierra and sees her as his dream woman and was unabashed in his constant admiration and praise for her. And people don't feel like she deserves that praise because she's a tainted woman because Future tainted her, right? That same mentality is being applied to by these women who proliferate this ideology that like, again, and just to say it for the final time, like really question how some of these users have decentered men in their thinking, and yet a man's opinion is what they'll judge other women by. right? And I think part of it is just this anger at like systems that they don't have the skills to articulate. And so it feels easy to like beat up on the other woman. Like, instead of articulating why you find it so disturbing that women are coerced into being sexual beings in the first place, you place the blame at Sabrina Carpenter's feet. And that's how you can get to a point where you're like, yeah, she set women back 50 years. You know what has set women back 50 years? The current presidential administration. That had nothing to do with Sabrina Carpenter. And while I do think celebrities are a good way to take the cultural temperature, to pretend like this type of imagery is what led to Roe v. Wade, being overturned in the Dobbs decision is ludicrous, right? And while we're on the subject of like other ludicrous arguments, I saw people who I ordinarily like respected arguing in complete good faith that like Sabrina's imagery communicates to a man that that's how women should be treated. And I don't know how to tell you, but like in a system where it is assumed that women are already treated a certain way, there is nothing you can do to further that principle, especially because the opposite is not true, right? Like, it is not true that if you were to behave modestly, if you were to not give in to this type of sexual imagery or this type of sexual expression, that men would respect you more. That is the biggest lie in the world. I think about the "What Were You Wearing" rape exhibit, where survivors of rape, sexual assault, and sexual violence come forward and they talk about what they were wearing, and it's never a fucking skimpy bikini. Although if she was wearing a skimpy bikini, it wasn't a justification for what happened to them. There's no justification for sexual violence. I won't continue to belabor the point because I know that you're smarter than that. But it's things like pajamas, sweatpants, jerseys, little kid princess dresses. Like, I cannot, but it's just kind of slut shamey. I can't believe it took me 56 minutes to articulate that, because that's been at the undercurrent of it. But like, just say that you don't like that Sabrina Carpenter is acting like a slut, and then just get it over with. Don't pretend some like modesty, purity argument that you're doing us all a favor by being like, I just want to see like women represented better. It's this weird respectability politics that like that I'm so sorry, but first of all, the majority of people who pay attention to Sabrina Carpenter are not men. I'm not saying men don't pay attention to her because she's not hot, but like the people who listen to her music, consume her music, they are not straight heterosexual men for whom the patriarchy is designed, right? It's women, it's queer men, non-binaries who love totes. It's whatever. Another outlandish argument, and I will just address this in like 3 sentences or less, is the whole like, oh, well, it's bad for kids. Women are not automatically role models for children just because you can't get it out of your thick fucking skull that women were put on this earth to be matriarchal, right? There is this pressure put on girls and women to always be role models for children in a way that is never put on men, even men who are actual fathers. Sabrina Carpenter is not for kids. She has not been for kids in a long time. If you allow your child to listen to Sabrina Carpenter, knowing the content of her lyrics, that is a skill issue. You are not doing parenting that well. It is not the responsibility of Sabrina Carpenter, just because she is a girl with a public platform, to censor herself for children. And again, it is a form of misogyny that forces women into the maternal to always think about children. They're hypothetical children, the children that they have responsibility for because you're a girl and you have a vagina and ovaries and you should want to be maternal and take care of kids. It's just bullshit, right? I was surprised to see how much of that was trending. Like, it was so weird. And it's this growing conservatism that's like, oh, yeah, you can tell that Gen Z is more conservative. And I hate to come to that conclusion because if you are a longtime listener, you know my opinion on, the differentiations between generations. But like, there really is this weird puritanical streak where, like I said at the beginning of the episode, this cannot be the image that makes you think Christ needs to come down now and set the world ablaze because we've just gone too far as a society. That is crazy. it's also like, it's very reminiscent of, again, to pull from a past episode, like the way that people tried to engage with like anti-hookup culture in a way that was very misogynistic, was just a new flavor of purity culture and took away women's sexual autonomy. And I've talked about this before, that like the idea that women, it stems from the idea that sex is something done to a woman, not something that she is an active participant in, and that it's not something she can derive physical pleasure from, right? Because I think it is well understood that like women can gain emotions and intimacy from sex, but people believe that that's the only takeaway from sex. It's a very regressive view, and it's still incredibly popular that like the only thing a woman has to gain from sex is the feeling of bonding with her partner, which of course can be a beautiful and lovely part of it. But it's also just things like you can just like the raw physical intensity of fucking. You can just like the physical sensation of getting off, of having an orgasm, of having another body pressed on you, or bodies. I don't know what you do in your free time. Get your freak on, girl, but always use a condom. That you can't like enjoy or love that sensation. And it was coming from girls who, again, kind of the same issue with like smart girls don't wear pink. I'm just going to start using that as a shorthand for, it's when you ignore, like you take issue with how, you take issue with the symptom of how a really nasty ideology manifests, but you don't question the ideology itself. Instead of questioning why, like the idea that like, oh, well, women can't have casual sex. Women have not been taught to have casual sex in a way that respects themselves because, again, women are taught that sex is not something that you are an active participant in. It is something that is done to you. And so when you break the rules, when you go outside of sex for marriage, or I think in today's modern age, like sex in a committed relationship, people think you are deserving of all the bad things. And we don't teach, because we have a very purity culture focused approach in this country about sexual education. It's very purity focused. Like I remember my health class, we had to do that thing with a stick of glue where it was only girls, by the way, had to stick two pieces together and you pull them apart. And it was like every time you have sex with someone, you leave a piece of yourself and you also become more and more damaged by the more sexual partners that you have. It was because a lot of girls are walking around with a lot of like sexual stigma and shame. That influences the fact that they don't believe they're worthy to have the sort of conversations that you should be having when you have sex with anyone, whether it's a long-term partner, whether it's, a friends with benefits situation, whether it's a person you meet in a club and you think, I'm going to go home with them tonight. There are certain conversations, and there's always a certain level of respect that you owed when you are intimate with someone. And we also don't teach boys that there is a certain level of intimacy or there's a certain level of respect that they're owed to people that they're intimate with, because boys get the same messaging, right? Like boys are taught that you don't have to treat like jump offs or thoughts well. Also, I just learned what BOP stands for. Fucking horrified. But you don't have to treat sluts well. But you do have to treat the girl you want to become your girlfriend well. And so, boys during puberty are being taught this messaging from older men, from their health teachers, from just society at large, that like you have the power to decide a woman's worth and that your word is gold. And also that women get to be treated differently based on your determination of their worth. Right? Because listen, some people are truly just not built for casual sex, and that's fine, and that's not a gendered thing. I know women who have that same belief. I have non-binary people in my life who have that same belief, and I have men in my life who have that same belief. And I also know people of all gender and gender expressions who have casual sex and are fine. It's not the thing that, like, as a girl, your brain is different. That is fake fucking pseudoscience. I don't even want to hear it. Okay? That like your brain is different and you're not capable. Again, like I've said in previous episodes, and I'm really belaboring the point here by just not getting to the end of it, but I don't know. I like beating around the bush and taking my time. And I think you like it too. Otherwise you wouldn't be an hour some deep into this episode. But women are not being taught that like you get to go into casual sex situationships with an idea of dignity. And also women are kind of subtly taught that you can use casual sex as a way to get emotional intimacy from someone, right? Like, I think a lot of girls approach the whole, like, I'll just be cool and I'll just be fun and I'll just have casual sex with a guy that they knew they had emotional feelings for. And because they weren't taught, like, respect yourself and have those conversations. Or if you know that this person is not like emotionally interested in you and you're emotionally interested in them, but they still want to have sex with you, don't have sex with them because it's not like it's just sex to them. So you're never going to get what you want. You're just hurting yourself. Right. But if you want to have sex just to have sex, you can and should do it. It's the whole point of being alive. It is one of the best parts of being alive and it's free. So like, be smart, be safe, but go forth. And instead, it was girls coming from this thing of like, they always talked about like men benefit so much from having sex with you, but girls get no benefit at all. And it's like, wait, like you have sex with people and you're not getting a benefit. And this is what contributes to the orgasm gap. Going back again to other episodes, other past episodes, that there are many things that contribute to the orgasm gap, but a big part of it is the belief that many women have been taught and carry with them that like the point of sex for them is also not physical gratification. I don't know any man who would stay in a relationship with a girl that couldn't make him come. And I bring this up because the statistics don't lie. The rate of orgasm for homosexual sex, whether it's 2 men, 2 women, the rate of orgasm for heterosexual men having sex is, depending on the studies that you look at, between like 80, like the high 80s to like low 90s% of, who's getting off every time, versus heterosexual women, it's around like 40. Sometimes it creeps closer to 50, depending on the study that you look at, but never half. That is frightening and scary. And again, while there are many reasons for, like, people will try to insist that it's something about female anatomy. If that was true, lesbians wouldn't be having, you know what I mean? But it's part of the belief that like you don't have to want to get yours during sex. I cannot tell you how many times I've had this discussion with adult women, like with friends, where I'm like, you understand, going back to what I said, that like he wouldn't stay with you if you never got him off, because he would understand that like his sexual needs, they are important in a relationship where you're sexually active. You completely disregard that and you're denying yourself one of life's pleasures. And like ultimately it doesn't have to happen every time. I don't think that's realistic for like men or women. God, I feel like I'm giving a sex ed lecture here, but it keeps me up at night, like how many women are just like, oh, but I'm satisfied. And it's like, no, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. You're just saying that because you've been indoctrinated as a straight woman to think that like all you need is just like the cuddly emotional feelings. And like, honestly, I don't even understand how you can continue to get that from a person who so clearly disregards your needs, or then people fake it. Life is too short. Life is too short, and that is a miserable way to live. Oh my God. So yeah, I do think that's part of what contributes to the orgasm gap, is just this idea that like women are not sexual beings in the way that men are, and women cannot experience sexual gratification in the way that men can. And that is just not true. And so people came to the conclusion when they were like anti-hookup culture and like you should just wait until you're in a committed relationship to have sex because you have everything to lose. And again, it was very purity culture, slut shaming, like your value goes down. Your value is not diminished by the number of sexual partners that you've had. And someone who makes you feel that way is a fucking ass. And also, in my experience, will probably turn out to be abusive. I don't have a study or a science for this. I just have known this from personal experience that like every friend that I've had who's gotten into a relationship with someone and they're like, oh, like what's your body count? they use that information later to abuse them. It really doesn't matter if the number's like 3 or 30. It is going to be a problem because that person is psycho in the head. And an adult should recognize this is not a sex ed lecture. We're getting away from the Sabrina Carpenter of it all. Coming back to the hookup thing, I also just think that people are uncomfortable with like a woman expressing her sexuality. And so they'll use these like, it's disempowering, it's degrading, which is a tenet of purity culture. Like some cultures that like try to, police a woman's modesty or like puts a very high price on her quote unquote virtue, actually outright acknowledges like the sexual appetites of men, and instead of seeking to like curbs men's behavior because it is something that can be augmented. And honestly, I think more men should have an issue with this idea that like they're sexual monsters who can't be satiated, because what are you, a dog? Like, are you a dog who just constantly needs to hump? Like, no, you're a human being. More men should be offended by that. Also, I don't understand how men are supposed to be leaders of the world, but also are supposed to have no control over their sexual appetites. It's like the thing where like, I feel like I say this in so many episodes, but like we're supposed to believe that men are leaders of the world, but then we're also supposed to believe that like they can't pick up a dish and a sponge. And they can't figure out how to like clean the dish with the sponge. You know what I mean? Like, it's not giving brilliant thinker of the year if you can't figure that out. It's also not giving someone who like should be in charge of nuclear codes if you like can't control where you want to put your dick. And men's quote unquote inability, I keep saying quote unquote, wow, that's just my new favorite word, I guess. But men's quote unquote LOL inability to like stick their dick is not like a biological function. It's just like you've been given the social green light to do whatever, and you're not a man of integrity, so you do that. Oh my god, it's taking me 11 minutes to make this point. The point is about the hookup culture. It erases a woman's autonomy to control sex, and it's very puritanical to believe that like, oh, you're protecting her or blah, 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 blah. And so she has to be careful about how she expresses herself. The whole thing, if I haven't made this clear in the past hour and 11 minutes, is that a lot of the backlash to Sabrina Carpenter album cover is bullshit. Is it good art? From what I know now, without seeing the full thing in a good opinion, like, honestly, no. If I wanted to be shocked sexually, I want to see something really crazy, like I said earlier. But is it art that is going to destroy the world? No. And I wish that people were more genuine about why this imagery pisses them off. And it has nothing to do with like your bastardization of like feminist ideals, or the fact that even if you were to make like a truly feminist argument against this, it's not situated in, the great feminist scholars who came before you or any sort of desire for women's empowerment. But rather this like faux feminism that is rampant on TikTok, platforming ideas from people who haven't done the work, an ideology that, for as much as it runs its mouth about men, still centers men as like the end all be all of why any woman would make a decision. Because while yes, Sabrina Carpenter is a heterosexual woman, and obviously like her attraction to men does influence her expression of sexuality, this could have all just been for herself. Like, I know at the times when I felt my sexiest, it wasn't for a man. It was just because I was really feeling like my morning skinny, and your boobs get a little bigger with birth control. And I was like, sensual. You know what I mean? Take a picture. So I don't know how to edit that out, but yeah, I don't like sharing so much of the world with prudes. I think it makes everything unfun. And I think at one point I accidentally cultivated an audience of prudes. Like, part of the reason why I've never elaborated on the whole like performative backshots thing is because people thought that I had an issue with like the position itself. And I promise you, if we talked about like missionary the same way that we talk about like doggy style, I would have just said performative missionary. It's just the way that we talk about back shots. This has nothing to do with like the position itself. And it just garnered a lot of like weird like celibacy freaks. And I can't say this enough. That's cool if you want to do that, but like I am the person who said that I hate bitches sitting in their beige apartments in their fuck ass Olaplex slick back, talking about like I'm knitting at 7 p.m. Like I love sluts and I love fun and I love, drinking a little bit too much and eating a little bit too much and laughing a little bit too hard and wearing something a little scantily clad because this is the time to do it, And like, I'll be modest when I'm dead in the grave because even as an old woman, I don't think I'm ever going to subscribe to that. And it's just, to me, it's like freedom and expression. And I can truly respect that if you're listening to this and you're like, well, Alexia, I feel invalidated because I express myself through modesty. It's one thing if it's like, almost the same way that people believe that like a woman genuinely cannot express herself sexually because she has to be doing it for a man. Perhaps my bias is I have a genuinely hard time believing that you are not expressing these virtues of like modesty to be a little bit of a self-righteous cunt. Like, I know it's not everyone, but God, it is so many people nowadays in this very weird era of like, everyone is just getting so moral panicky. I was trying to have this conversation with my sister. Hi, Lana, I know you're listening. Like, why are 23-year-olds talking about like I'm dating for marriage? And she brought up the counter argument that like some people are afraid of getting hurt, and like I get that, yada yada yada, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I mean that more in the sense of like, well, I know what the rush is because I've unpacked it again, going back to past episodes, that like people lean into traditionalism and conservatism in times of like period of social unrest, and the reason why femininity content is making such a resurgence, and why I predicted 2 years ago, and I have not been proven wrong this far, that femininity content was going to continue to grow in popularity as the economy became more unstable, as politics became more unstable. As the world begins to make less and less sense, people are going to want to cling on to an ideology that promotes like a traditional, rigid rule system that you can align and orient yourself to make sense of the world. And people really like this idea that you can control your outcomes, and traditionalism and conservatism promises that. I understand that, but like, God, it's like nobody wants to be fun, which was kind of what I was going to talk about, this week, having finally completed that research on fascism. But perhaps this is the introduction to it because, again, I have been staring at Sabrina Carpenter's image the whole time, and it literally, like, I don't want to be shady and like put the other TikToks in here that I genuinely did laugh out loud at the toilet, but like people are talking about this promotes domestic violence. No, there are many things that promote domestic violence, but like you have to have the range to be able to talk about kink and feminism, and that is just not the range. Who cares if that girl wants to get her hair pulled? And also, I didn't even touch on the most obvious part. This is her brand, right? Like this is her this is a girl who I saw clips of her this summer, like pretending to be Eiffel Towered. Like, I would not expect demure sexual purity modesty from her. And she's in her 20s. She's young. She's hot. She's got a beautiful face, great body. Like, why not? It just, I don't know. I guess I'm running out of the ways to, I'm not properly articulating how much of a creepy, tingly feeling I have, because everyone always wants to be like, oh, this is a right-wing pipeline. This is a right-wing pipeline. And there are many things that I think are a right-wing pipeline. Femininity content, divester content aimed at Black girls. But it's like it doesn't even feel like a pipeline, because right-wing pipeline, I think, is at least, the pipeline that it sends you down towards, right-wing conservatism. I don't pronounce that word correctly. Sorry if that's bothering you. At least it's like sneaky in its intentions. Like, this is just like straight up old fashioned witch hunty slut shaming. You guys would have a heart attack. Like, I know people were bringing up Slipknot's cover, but like you guys would have a heart attack seeing a Britney Spears cover. I think, like, can you imagine if Britney Spears' performance of Slave Free, where she's literally singing about being a sexual slave for someone and dancing around, if they saw that now, like, people would piss. I honestly don't think that, like, I don't like to be one of those people that says like this couldn't be released, but I wonder what the reaction, like, I think I discussed this in last week's episode, how it's interesting to track how, like, where we are in the zeitgeist, like, different pieces of media. What would the 2025 reaction to WAP be? I don't know. And then the last thing that I'll address is I did see a couple people make the point that, like, if Sexy Red had done this, there wouldn't be, like, a small minority of people who were like, listen, this was just a sign of, like, growing sorry, I'm not gonna be able to pronounce this correctly, conservatism, um, and, like, these weird puritanical beliefs, and it's not a good thing. And people were like, well, if Sexy Red had done this, that would have been a different thing. Okay, so Sexy Red did do this with Sukihana. She got walked on a leash by NLE Choppa. I didn't like that because I'm gonna be real with you. Um, I don't think that you should let a man like NLE Choppa walk you around. Not a man who took a gun, shot it into his baby mama's house where she was there with, I believe his child was less than 6 weeks old, domestic violence. And then when the news of that started going around, he completely rebranded. And that's why he was on that spiritual journey from, like, 2021 to, like, 2023, until he just realized that, like, enough of the public forgot about it. And then his label was like, okay, you can lean back into the whole, like, womanizing, like, if I was a bitch, I would fuck me too, or whatever that song is. God, I've sworn so much. It was probably good that I didn't put my face on YouTube for this one. But yeah, the unfunness. And I am a person, like, I'm a thought daughter final boss. It is that deep. It's always that deep. But sometimes we need to deep why you think it's deep and what's really fueling this. And so I loved talking about the Sabrina Carpenter of it all with you, because I loved getting into a real juicy, meaty episode where I got to bounce around to a bunch of different topics, and it was cool for me to, like, pull back on some of the things that we've already established in past episodes. And because I think I could have done a stronger job at describing, like, the feminist sex wars, I will provide a good comprehensive reading that you can really sink your teeth into. So thank you for bearing with me that this podcast episode was a day late. I hope you enjoy how long it is, juicy full. And just know that when we finally get around to talking about how nobody wants to be fun anymore and how fascism often follows pandemics, that I have a lot of strong opinions. Okay? I love you so much. Thank you for listening. And send healthy thoughts my way. Mwah. Bye.